World News Today, brought to you by Admiral Corporation in behalf of Admiral distributors and dealers all over America and in many foreign lands. By shortwave broadcast, direct from important overseas stations and leading news centers in our own country, CBS reporters are waiting to bring you first-hand news from the world's political and battlefronts. Now, here's Douglas Edwards.
The last 18 hours has brought the greatest air attacks of all time against Germany. Thousands of Allied heavy bombers attacked military targets in the Cologne area within 40 miles of the battleground at Aachen, where American ground troops continue to make some progress. The German DNB news agency has announced the death of Field Marshal Rommel. DNB said the Desert Fox died of severe head wounds received in a car accident while serving as commander of a German army group on the Western Front. Moscow has just reported that Russian troops have captured Petsamau, Finland's great northern port. And now for details of the fighting in Western Europe, Admiral takes you to Supreme Allied Headquarters in France. Larry Lasser reporting.
It was a typical autumn day on the Western Front. A cold, impersonal rain has been falling for many hours, drenching and chilling our soldiers and the Germans alike. Again today, the most active part of the long front was up in the flatlands of Western Holland, where Canadian troops are battling courageously and with a fine display of imaginative tactics to clear the approaches to the great port of Antwerp. The Canadian command pulled another fast play on the trapped German division in the Scheldt pocket by launching new assaults over and around the Leopold Canal. This neat little end run brought the bitterly resisting Germans under fire from two new Canadian sectors and took the enemy completely by surprise. All the members of the trapped 64th German Division were engaged fighting either the original beachhead over the Leopold Canal or the other Canadians who landed by sea. So these tricky new assaults were met by very little opposition, and the new Canadian beachhead advanced rapidly, taking the little town of Watervliet by storm. Those Americans who live in the town of Watervliet in New York State will be happy by this news of the liberation of the original Watervliet. There's less pleasing news from the other sector, north of Antwerp, where the Canadians had cut the neck of the peninsula connecting the German-held islands of South Beveland and Walcheren from the mainland. The Germans uncorked a powerful counterattack that knocked the Canadians back, and reopened the German supply line to the mainland with the recapture of the main road leading from the island. The widespread bad weather over the front hampered the doughboys and their fighter-bomber air support. The German SS troops are still holding out near the center of Aachen. But the weather didn't stop the record-breaking fleets of Allied heavy bombers operating from Britain from softening up the Rhineland. Last night, the RAF went a long way towards wiping out the Rhineland city of Duisburg by going back with a 5,000-ton bombardment while the city was still blazing from the staggering 4,500-ton attack earlier in the day. And today, 1,200 fortresses and liberators, escorted by American fighters, gave the Rhineland city of Cologne its second tremendous attack in 3 days. And this is Larry Lasser returning you now to Admiral in New York.
For other Western Front developments, Admiral takes you now to London. Eric Severard reporting.
This is London. As to Aachen, the disposition of the city is no longer an important matter. It is a secondary cleanup problem. Aachen, for both the Allies and the Nazis, was intended to be a lesson. We would show all Germany that the only alternative to capitulation is annihilation. The Nazis would show us what we must expect in every German city on our route. And from what they did to their own residents who tried to yield to us, perhaps it was also meant as a lesson to all German civilians. For days, hardly a breath of news has been stirring here about the American 7th Army in the Vosges Mountains and the French 1st Army in the Belfort Gap near Switzerland. Today it's reported the French have taken Cornimont, which controls some of the roads through the mountain pass. This front has been static for weeks, but stalemate would not be the right word, for that would imply equal forces. Both American and French armies there are building up and have been for a long time, and they will be very powerful when the great assault comes. I left that hilly, muddy, miserable sector just the other day. No one there doubts that we can and will cross the Rhine. The Rhine there runs very cold and very fast, 8 or 9 mile current, and its crossing is expected to be one of the most difficult feats of engineering any army has ever faced. You have heard many times that we are now halted on the western frontiers because of a difficult problem in supply. The words cannot really tell you. If you had been with me one recent night, shivering beside a narrow, winding mountain road, you would have seen the dark hulk of an American truck careening senselessly into the ditch. The boy driving, a moment before, had fallen out of his seat. He fell out because he had been at the wheel for 24 hours, and he had simply gone asleep. This is Eric Severide in London. I return you now to Admiral.
More news in just a moment, but first, Warren Sweeney with a message from Admiral Corporation.
Are you lazy? Or to put it not quite so bluntly, do you like labor-saving devices? Then you'll certainly be enthusiastic about Slide Away in the post-war Admiral radio phonographs with automatic record changers. Slide Away is an exclusive Admiral feature that makes loading and unloading your automatic record changer easier and more convenient than you ever dreamed it could be. For with Admiral Slide Away, your complete automatic record changer and phonograph turntable come right out in plain sight, easy to reach at convenient height. No more fumbling in dark, hard-to-reach compartments when you load your changer with your favorite records. Open the cabinet doors, and out it comes. Close the doors, and back out of sight it goes. It's as easy as that. Remember, Slide Away is an exclusive feature found only in Admiral radio phonographs. American buyers have certainly placed the stamp of approval on Slide Away and Admiral radio phonographs, for their preference has made Admiral the world's largest manufacturer of radio phonographs with automatic record changers. Ask your next-door neighbor about Admiral. He probably has one. He'll tell you about a lot of other Admiral exclusive features that every Admiral owner is proud of and likes to talk about. Now, here once again is Douglas Edwards.
CBS correspondent Farnsworth Fowle has just arrived in Rome. For his story on the situation in the Mediterranean area, Admiral takes you to CBS Rome, Farnsworth Fowle reporting.
There is no fresh news from Athens, which was entered yesterday by British forces, some landing near the city and others arriving overland from Corinth. The Germans had cleared out of the Greek capital ahead of them. There seems to be a slight tendency to begrudge the fact that only a lightweight force has been sent in. It isn't really a campaign at all. If it had been necessary to send a major expeditionary force into Greece, the chances are that the operation would not have taken place. The Allied forces in the Mediterranean already had their hands full fighting Kesselring's divisions in Italy. Several of the finest combat divisions in this theater, American and French, went into France with the 7th Army. Those who remain have gone ahead steadily with the Apennine offensive. Today's brief communique mentions some progress on the 8th Army sector. Local gains against very heavy resistance on the 5th Army front below Bologna. The 5th Army has registered gains every single day for the past 3 weeks. Some of these gains have to be repeated. We learned today that the South Africans have recaptured Monte Stanco. Stanco is the Italian word for tired, and Tired Mountain is a good name for just about any peak in the Apennines. It is admitted frankly that we had hopes of reaching the Po Valley before the end of the summer season. From now on, there is no prospect of enough clear weather to dry out the ground. But these armies have shown that a winter campaign is possible. They're making up their minds to go through with it a second time if necessary, until the Germans, even if reinforced from the divisions in retreat from the Balkans, are worn out and broken. As for Greece, there has already been more suffering and sacrifice than we can forget, and if the last act can be played out with a minimum of bloodshed, so much the better. This is Farnsworth Fowle in Rome, returning now to Admiral in New York.
And now, for a summary of the latest developments on the great Russian front, here is Columbia's military analyst, Major George Fielding Elliott.
The capture of the Finnish port of Petsamo by Russian forces marks an important development in the little publicized campaign in northern Finland, which involves the fate of some 7 to 9 German divisions. The German purpose is to extricate these troops and bring them into German-held Norway. They are under severe pressure from Russian and Finnish troops, and now their only hope of escape by sea has been cut off. There remains to them only the slender hope of escaping by the ice-covered roads, few in number and small in capacity, which link Finland with Norway. Possibly some of them may be compelled to cross into Sweden and be interned as an alternative to death or surrender. But the most interesting development on the Eastern Front today is the report that Hungary may be quitting the war. According to the London radio, as heard by Columbia's shortwave listening station, the Hungarian regent, Admiral Horthy, has announced over the Budapest radio that Hungary has asked for armistice terms. A later broadcast by the Hungarian Chief of Staff warns that Hungarian troops must continue fighting since an armistice has not yet been granted, and it is for the present only a question of negotiations. It is possible that this means that the Germans are resisting Horthy's move and are taking over the army, or trying to. The possibility must be considered because the Germans have some 12 divisions in Hungary, and the Hungarians only 16 or 17. However this may be, it would seem likely that the Regent's announcement will take most of the remaining fighting spirit out of the Hungarian troops, and that resistance in the path of the advancing Russian armies on the road to Budapest may collapse. The Germans are faced with a situation whose seriousness from their point of view cannot be exaggerated. Not only must they contemplate the loss of their only remaining ally, but must prepare to defend their southern front at a moment when they are hard-pressed both in east and west. Now here again is Douglas Edwards.
A little north of Toronto, Canada, in Camp Little, Norway, is a flying training base exclusively for young Norwegians who have managed to escape. For an interview with one of the most recent arrivals in Camp Little, Norway, we take you to the studios of station CFRB, Toronto. Bill Slocum, Jr., reporting.
Pearland, sitting across from me now, is a 24-year-old, blue-eyed giant in a slate-gray Norwegian Air Force uniform. Not too long ago, he was in charge of a large district of the Norwegian underground, an important post he had earned after 4 years of hard work. Per, tell us something about your very successful career in the underground.
It started in the best American tradition. I distributed newspapers. Then I got a little more important work. Then I killed a German, and then I started making trips into Germany.
Making trips into Germany?
Yes. I speak one German dialect perfectly. We wanted to learn something of what was going on in and around Hamburg, so our leader sent me.
Can you tell us how you got in and out of Germany?
It was extremely simple. I killed a German captain in Norway. It took a little time to find one my size, but I finally did. Cleaned up his uniform, wrapped it in a bundle, and stowed away in a lifeboat on a cargo ship to Kiel. I had quite a scare in that lifeboat. When I sneaked into it, I realized somebody else was in it too.
Another underground agent?
Yes, my brother Knut. He was going someplace else in Germany.
How could you walk around Germany in a German captain's uniform without being caught?
Very simple. The Germans are snubs. Nobody over the rank of captain would be bothered speaking to me, and nobody under the rank of captain dared speak to me. I just kept away from other captains. I had no trouble at all. Another member of the Norwegian underground met me at our rendezvous point in Hamburg and took me to the hiding place.
How long?
Another member of the Norwegian underground met me at our rendezvous point in Hamburg and took me to the hiding place.
How long did you stay in Hamburg?
15 hours. Allied planes had flattened it. I got the informations I wanted and went back to Norway.
How?
I can't tell you that. The road is still heavily traveled.
How many trips did you make into Germany, Per?
3, always as a captain. I also visited concentration camps and German fortifications in that uniform. I got to be very adept at playing the German captain. I could scream and swear at German privates and lieutenants and kick them around. That was fun, just like a real Prussian. And I could stand stiffly at attention and salute my superiors.
You make underground work in Norway and Germany sound very simple.
That's too bad, because it isn't. Life expectancy is 14 to 16 days when you are in Germany. In Norway, I visited concentration camps as a captain, and I was tossed into one for a few months. So I well knew the penalty of any mistake I might make, or anybody else might make.
I suppose you are heavily dependent upon your fellow undergrounders.
Indeed you are. Somebody, it doesn't matter who, made a silly mistake in making out my brother's papers. The Gestapo caught him in Munich and shot him on the spot.
Have you any ideas what will happen to Quisling when Norway is freed?
Yes. By the time Norway is freed, there will be no Quisling. Right now, he is what you Americans call a stew bomb. Somebody will sober him up with a knife or a bullet. I always hoped I might have the honor, but I guess not.
Pearland, as you undoubtedly realize, is the Norwegian equivalent of John Smith. Nobody will know his real name until the Germans are beaten. But whatever his name, he is the personification of a gallant nation of 3 millions, which was betrayed and beaten, but never conquered. Thanks, Pearland. I return you now to Admiral in New York.
For news of the Pacific and an interview with a Navy combat photographer from Los Angeles, Admiral takes you to CBS Pearl Harbor. Webley Edwards reporting.
There are indications that considerable activity is continuing in the Formosa area. Third Fleet carrier strikes in the Formosa, Luzon, Ryukyu area, plus B-29 bomber attacks have posed a real problem for the Japanese, who've shown reluctance to commit their fleet, but who are evidently attempting to combat the determined United States carrier threat in the East China Sea with land-based planes. Tokyo has claimed the sinking of up to 17 American warships, which is fantastic. It is only common sense to suppose, however, that fleet activity so close to Japan's homeland may result in some losses to ships. During the assault at Peleliu, I watched some planes dusting off the treetops. They were that low, and somebody turned and said to me, "Look at those dopes, they're breaking their necks." And somebody else said, "Taking pictures. You have to be half nuts to be a good combat photographer." I agreed at the moment, but since meeting some of them, I find they're quiet, gentlemanly fellows who are very careful crossing streets, wear their rubbers out when they go in the rain, but who forget all about danger and everything else about combat when they're after pictures. For example, here's the very guy we were watching at Peleliu. Photographer's mate, first class, Lauren F. Smith, born in Des Moines, home now in Monrovia and Los Angeles, California. He's been in this war from the start in many campaigns and has just returned for a short breather. Smitty, do you ever get scared?
Sure do, but usually when it's all over. Don't have much time to think about being scared when you're in it. Our main job is to get pictures, and that's our main worry. You don't do much that regular correspondents do at that. In fact, I guess about the only difference between us Navy combat photographers and war correspondents and photographers is that we work for the Navy.
Well, how many campaigns have you been in?
Well, let's see. Salamala in March 42, Battle of Santa Cruz, Tarawa, the Marshalls, Hollandia, first and second carrier airstrikes at Truk, Saipan, and Palau. I was on ships during the early part, but lately I've been on planes. I like it better on planes because you can see more and get better shots.
Which you like best among planes?
Well, dive bombers. They're better to shoot pictures out of. I've gotten so I can even take them at the bottom of the dive when the pull of gravity coming out of the dive makes my 20-pound camera weigh the equal of 100 pounds. Until recently, we've been riding in combat planes. What we like is when a plane is especially assigned to us. We can stay longer and get more pictures. The pilots like combat best, but they're pretty good about it because they know how important it is to have the pictures. They say, though, that a special photo mission is one of the most dangerous there is because you have to maintain such a straight course. The anti-aircraft have time to get an eye on you.
You ever been hit?
No, but I had a camera blown right out of a plane once.
Well, I understand you got some beautiful and valuable pictures there on Peleliu, Smitty, including some of the few rare pictures that have ever been made of live Japs during combat. I thought a couple of times you were going to plow right through old Bloody Nose Ridge, though. You were so low. And I'll never forget how you fellas would fly under our warship gunfire along the shore so you could get closer pictures. Well, good luck to you, photographer's mate, Lauren Smith, and I hope you get that leave one of these days. This is Webley Edwards at Fleet Headquarters, Pearl Harbor. I return you to Admiral in New York.
And now for home front news and an interview with the Army Surgeon General on the treatment our wounded are receiving. Admiral takes you to CBS Washington. Joe McCaffrey reporting.
It appears likely today that the practical politicians in the Democratic camp may win their plea for President Roosevelt to make at least one major speech in Pennsylvania during the next 3 weeks of the campaign. This was learned after it had been revealed by reliable sources that John Lewis, head of the United Mine Workers, would do all in his power to swing his 150,000 Pennsylvania Union members into the Dewey column. Those are the latest developments here in Washington. In this war, we all know that the soldier in the American Army is receiving the best training and the best equipment that it is possible to develop. That soldier is getting something else, too. Something that is more important to him. He is getting the best medical attention on and off the battlefield that modern science can provide. Today, as our guest, we have the Surgeon General of the United States Army, Major General Norman T. Kirk. The doctors and nurses under General Kirk are responsible for the health of the men and women serving with the armed forces. And it is because of their excellent work and modern methods that our mortality rate in battle is constantly being lowered when compared with the record of World War I. General, you viewed firsthand the operations of the medical corps on the scene of battle in France. Suppose you give us a brief picture of what you observed there.
I was most interested in finding out how long it took medical aid to reach a wounded man. Talking to the wounded, I found that soldier after soldier told me that he had received medical aid within minutes after he had been hit. The medical aid men are right along with those combat soldiers who are doing the fighting. They are prepared to give them first aid and then transport them to the rear for medical and surgical treatment in the shortest possible time. Many men are operated upon within less than 4 miles of the front lines, and although the conditions under which the surgeons and nurses work are hazardous, modern methods are used and lives are saved.
General, what are the most important contributing factors to the excellence of our Army's treatment of the wounded?
Modern surgery, plasma, whole blood. But I would say that the most important factor is the personal professional care given by the doctors and nurses.
Right now, there is a most desperate need for nurses, isn't there?
Yes, we need nurses. We have to have them. Their aid in this war cannot be measured. Remember, the wounded soldier was a highly trained fighting man until he fell in action. He was the best our nation had to offer. Therefore, when he is wounded, he needs not only expert care, but understanding care. That type of care he receives at the hands of our nurses. Nurses are much more than trained medical assistants. They aid in instilling within the wounded the desire that they will recover. The wounded man believes that he soon will be well and do a job, and has complete confidence in what his doctors and his nurses tell him. That this confidence is not misplaced is shown by the fact that 97% of those wounded who reach Army hospitals get well.
In order to be able to more completely care for our men in the battle zones, General, how many nurses are needed for service immediately?
10,000 nurses are needed, and I'm sure out of the 209,000 nurses now at home who are available to join the Army Nurse Corps, thousands would volunteer if they could see the comfort and life-saving aid our nurses are giving at the front. A year ago, I saw many of our nurses living in tents close behind the front in Africa. When I visited France, I found many of these same nurses still in tents, still washing up out of their helmets, still eating K-ration, but glowing with the realization that they were doing a grand job. After my visit to the front, I can think of no greater contribution than a nurse can make for her country than to be a part of the team which is helping save the lives of our men in the service.
Thank you very much, General. I return you now to Admiral in New York.
Do you want to hear about the first major improvement in electric refrigeration in many years? Then you'll want to know about the Admiral 2-temperature refrigerator, America's first complete electric refrigerator. For 6 full years before the war, many thousands of delighted homeowners sang the praises of its many exclusive features. The Admiral is the only refrigerator with a separate, completely insulated, built-in home freezer that makes it possible to fast freeze your own foods at home or to keep commercially frozen products for months. And ice cubes? Say, you can freeze and store literally hundreds of them for the Saturday night party. Yes, and Admiral is the only refrigerator with purified moist cold in the roomier, regular food storage compartment. You need no covered dishes either, because this moist cold keeps foods crisp and fresh as early morning dew. Then, too, Admiral is the only refrigerator with Sterilamp, the amazing ultraviolet lamp that kills bacteria, retards mold, and eliminates offensive odors. And last, but certainly not least, Admiral is the only refrigerator without the regular messy job of defrosting. Yes, indeed, just as Admiral Radio is America's smart set, so is the Admiral 2-temperature refrigerator America's only complete electric refrigerator. Again this fall, Americans all are being asked to support the National War Fund. The National War Fund is a federation of 22 major war-related welfare and relief agencies. With one single gift, you can help our fighting men, our prisoners of war, victims of war-ravaged countries, refugees, as well as your own needy neighbors. Give generously when the call comes in your own community. World News Today is brought to you each Sunday at this hour by Admiral Corporation, makers of Admiral Radio, America's smart set, and post-war makers of Admiral refrigerators, Admiral home freezers, Admiral electric ranges. Be sure to listen again next Sunday when Admiral brings you World News Today by shortwave direct from leading news centers of the world. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
The WBBM Air Theater, Wrigley Building, Chicago.